Hey everybody, Reaper here again with another video discussion. I want to talk a little bit about the grading companies. Now, again, I've talked about them in a previous video. I don't know when I released it, a year or two ago. CGC versus CBCS versus PGX. So I'll just sum up everything again in this, and we'll try to have a little discussion about it. I know this is a subject, though, that really divides. It's almost like politics in a way. When anytime you talk to somebody about politics or religion or some of the controversial issues that exist in our society today, they divide people. I mean, there are some that can have a meaningful conversation with another person who has an opposing belief to theirs on a specific subject, but it seems like that today it's just few and far between. It just seems that way. I think that's a shame. That's the way things are nowadays. That you can't have a debate with somebody or talk humanly to another person that has a conflicting or a contrary has the contrary belief to whatever the issue is out there, without resorting to name calling and all that stuff. I think that's it's unfortunate. It seems to be it's like a society in decay. But that's not really what we're talking about here necessarily. Not necessarily when it comes to those sort of things like politics or anything, but what we are talking about is the grading companies. But I do feel that the things that I just mentioned, apply in a way to the grading. Your thoughts on the grading company. This stuff like that does divide some collectors. You have some of the old timers that will insist that comics are meant for reading, and no doubt they are. I mean, no shit. Oh, really? I didn't know they were meant for reading. It's funny though. Some people, when it comes to comic book collecting and all that stuff, it's meant for reading, right? Despite that, so many people that are involved in comics or collecting comics still have comprehension problems. Despite being involved in a hobby that requires reading. But then again, though, just because you read, that does not necessarily mean you comprehend very well. Sorry for that little rant. Or maybe I'm not. Grading companies. I have a bunch of graded books. I prefer CGC. And, there's always that argument that CBCS grades harsher than CGC. I haven't seen an example of that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Okay, let's go back to what I was saying earlier. We could have opposing views and let's still try to remain cordial. The counter to what I said is that CBCS does. I prefer CGC. But I think CBCS is better because of their grading. I don't think so. I've seen plenty of books with CBCS with certain grades, and I look at it and I say, how the hell did that get such a high grade? And to counter that, I look at CGC, and I'll look at a bunch of books and I'll say, how the hell did that get that grade? Whether it's they graded it too high or too low. So I think that there is there's common ground when it comes to that particular subject within grading companies. Sometimes they are a little inconsistent, but I found that CBCS is a little more inconsistent. That doesn't mean that that's the way it's always going to be, and that does not mean that I wouldn't submit something to CBCS, and that doesn't mean that I would not buy a CBCS book. Certainly not. That certainly does not mean that. I would buy a CBCS book. And you'd say, well, yeah, of course you buy it because it's you think you're getting a better price, but it's a lower grade than what it is. Whatever. If I buy a book, whether it's CGC, like I said, I prefer CGC, or CBCS, and I buy it, I'm buying it because I think it's good. I trust in the grade, or at least I have an idea of what the real grade is. In my mind, doesn't mean I'm right. And I like the price, whether it's priced at the grade that's on that label or it's priced at a grade that I think it is. If I think the price is right, I will buy it. And that leads me to PGX. Typically, I don't buy PGX books, but I'm not opposed to buying PGX books. I know some of the complaints that are out there with PGX books, that they're completely unprofessional when it comes to grading. Their restoration sometimes slips their eyes, and they don't see it, and they give a book a universal grade when really should have a restored grade. And that's a fear that I have, and I think that's a main fear that a lot of people have with PGX. That's no doubt about it, and I perfectly understand where you're coming from on that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm hesitant. But again, I do have some PGX books, and for the same reasons I said before about CBCS and CGC, if I think, looking at the book, that the grade is what I think it is, whether it matches that label or not, and I think that the price is good, I will buy it. Sometimes I will take a risk. And a lot of times I've taken risks and it's worked out for me. It's worked out for me. Very rarely it hasn't worked out for me. But then again, though, I don't really take huge risks. Like some of you out there, maybe you're really taking a huge risk by buying that Amazing Fantasy graded 5.0 for PGX. And the reason why you can get it is because it's PGX, and it's not many people are too thrilled with getting a big book like Fantasy graded by PGX. And a lot of times people buy it and it works out, and sometimes it won't work out, and that's where the hesitation comes. But I'm game for whatever I think is fair. I try to keep an open mind. Sometimes I don't have an open mind. Sometimes I'll say I have an open mind, and I have to reflect back that I really don't have much of an open mind when it comes to things like this. But I try to keep an open mind, and I think I'm fairly open-minded when it comes to this subject. Even though I said I do have a bias, I do tend to go for CGC more than the others. But, there's a book right now that I have my eye on that's a PGX. And if the price is right, I'll buy it. I don't care. It's not like, oh, PGX, forget it. Nope. That could be restored. It all goes with taking risks. Sometimes people, and I'm not saying this to any of you that are watching or anything like that, but this is just a generalization. Sometimes people, they don't want to take risks, but they want to have big gains. Sometimes you have to take risk, or risk. You have to take risks, or take a risk, or whatever way you want to say it, in order to get a big gain. Sometimes you win some, and sometimes you lose some. Sometimes what you can lose might be a little too much, and I could understand that you don't want to take that risk. But sometimes you do have to take a risk. And I think what I'm doing when it comes to what I've been saying are safe risks. I think PGX and CBCS are graded books, graded companies that are worth looking into to fill in the gaps in your collection, to get that book that you want. I don't think it's automatically, something for me to strike down. It's just, I don't think so. I like to keep an open mind with that. So that's pretty much the way I feel when it comes to these grading companies. It's a little bit of a different take than what I've been talking about over the past few years, right? A little different. There's some of the similarities in what I've said in this video and other videos. So, you could sit back and say, oh, you talked about this. But I think I've given you enough new stuff that I haven't talked about when it comes to this subject. What else I wanted to say about the grading companies? I don't think, and this is something I've said before, I don't think this is the end of the hobby. A lot of people say, oh, it's the end of the hobby, all that stuff, oh, I don't like where this hobby's going. We could say that about anything, because of the grading and all that stuff. But aside from collecting raw books because they need to be read, or they need to be this way or that way, I think the grading companies, and they all have the potential to do this in their own way, some more than others, I think they have the potential to really, for those that want to cash in, or cash out rather, cash in, cash out when it comes to this hobby. Whenever that may be, it gives them a better chance to do it. All right, if you're a CBCS guy or gal, because they grade the best, one of the arguments I hear, fine. That's what you believe in, fine. And you find somebody else that thinks the same way you do, great. Then you could sit back and say, well, you know, CBCS, they grade very well. They're pretty strict with their grading. This is as clearly a 6.5. So then you want to cash out. You'll be able to get what you want with little debate. I mean, there's always people that want to debate, like, oh, will you take this? Or will you take that? What's the lowest you're willing to go? You know, that's a conversation for another video. But you would have some ground to really stand on, strong ground to stand on and say, yes, this is a 6.0. Or same thing for people that really want CGC. Yes, this is a 5.0. This is an 8.5. This is a 9.8. All that stuff. For those that want to cash out, it helps, I think, a lot. Because I've noticed, too, that, and I'm not saying this is the norm for everybody, but I've noticed that sometimes when people are offering a nice, high-grade looking book, and it's raw. One of the biggest complaints is, well, you know, that's a lot of money to ask for a raw book. It's not even graded. We could debate all day on what the true grade is, but somehow when the grading company puts a name on it, a grade on it, excuse me, all of a sudden it becomes more acceptable. So if you're looking to get rid of your collection, you're looking to cash out, sometimes that's where those grading companies come in handy. You know. But of course, there are always negatives to grading too. You know, sometimes, at least I get this from my comic book shop guy. He'll say, you know, sometimes graded books don't sell because buyers will come in thinking that, you know, hey, has that book already been pressed? Because they want a better grade. You know, he said this to me one time. You know, one guy came in. I think he was looking to get a graded book, right? Whatever it was, I think it was like a 9.4, 9.6, something like that. He said, oh, has that been pressed? And he said, no, hasn't been pressed. And the guy's like saying, like, oh, you know, if I crack it out, you know, you think maybe I'll get a 9.8 or something like that? Or I think he said something like, can I return this if I crack it out? It was something ridiculous. Can I crack it out if I don't get like a 9.8? And I think he said, no, you can't return it. And his argument back to the buyer was, well, if you get a 9.8, are you going to give me more money? Because I obviously didn't price it that high. And of course, the answer was no. So sometimes buyers are, you know, sometimes I don't know if they are really aware of what they're saying. But those things happen. So I can see the downside to having things graded when you're encountering some buyers like that. But I think overall, I think it is a good thing. It is a good thing. And I'm not going to get into the whole debate that what's ruining the hobby, what's ruining baseball cards, what's ruining gaming, what's ruining comics when it comes to grading. You know, I'm just looking at it as something that I think is pretty good. I'm looking at it innocently and trying to look at it what's best for what can I get the best bang for my buck. All right. Maybe some of you look at it the same way. Maybe some of you don't. What are your thoughts on this? Be very interested in reading about it. But again, let's try to keep things cordial when we deal with this subject, because I think it is kind of, it does create two camps. For those that are in the middle camp, when people decide to create a middle camp, a lot of times they're shouted over and you don't hear them. So let's just try to be cordial with this. Let's save the whole, you know, the hobby's coming to an end, world destruction sort of thing for something else. Take care, everybody, and be safe.